I don't remember ever hearing a sermon about how the church should take care of widows. If I did, I've forgotten. I mean, it didn't make much of an impact. Paul writes to Timothy in very specific terms and details about how the church ought to take care of widows in their midst. James writes that pure religion and undefiled is taking care of widows and orphans in their need. So it follows that as an institution, the church is to pursue the pure and undefiled religion that James writes about. Well, okay, so Paul's talking about it now, and he says that we're in 1 Timothy 5, beginning at verse 9, where he talks about an actual formalized list of those in the church who are widowed. And he gives some parameters. He says, no widow may be put on the list of widows unless she is over 60, has been faithful to her husband, and is well known for her good deeds, such as bringing up children, showing hospitality, washing the feet of the Lord's people, helping those in trouble, and devoting herself to all kinds of good deeds. And we talked about the first part. We talked about being well known for good deeds, and specifically, evidently, because of the way it appears, I think Paul was saying, oh, by the way, here's the most important good deed that a widow, and I would even say any parent, can do, and that's to bring up their children well, showing hospitality. We talked about that. And one of the things that I think is worth noting on showing hospitality is I would say it's a cultural issue today for us. Our culture has a very different kind of view and many more options for hospitality than the first century Christians did. In century 1, when Paul writes about hospitality, he basically is pointing to really only a couple of things. One would be that you would invite people into your home for meals, for just the fellowship and refreshing of your home, for guests that would stay for one night or more. Right? Now, in our culture, hospitality can take many different kinds of forms. In my sense, it comes down to we do stuff together. We go, pardon me, let's go have dinner together. Let's go to a movie together. Let's go to whatever, pickleball, whatever it is. This hospitality, it involves inviting people to join you in life. Now, an advantage for us, I think, has probably become a disadvantage for this whole hospitality thing. Because we can show hospitality and never have to open our home. Right? If it's, let's go play pickleball, let's go to the show, let's do together, let's be together, and all those things are good and legitimate. But the root of hospitality is your home, the hospice, the safeness, the caring environment of the home, and to invite people in. Now, excuse me. I've told you this, and so I'm going to confess it again. I am not really good at hospitality. I'm not anti. and I don't not want to have people in my home. It's that I just never think of it. I mean, it rarely comes into my mind, oh, we should have them over. Not very many times. It's more like, oh gosh, I look back and think, oh, I missed, oh gosh, we should have. I told you this too. My youngest daughter, Jenny, is pretty much opposite on that. Her radar never goes dead on looking for people to have in their home. And they almost, I would say, many more nights they have people in their home than nights when it's just them. I don't think you have to have somebody in your home 350 nights a year. If you're wired for that, you should go for it with gusto. But I do think it will start with low-hanging fruit. Could you show hospitality on the home front once a month? I mean, you don't have to have steaks. And, you might have beanie weenie. That's not the point. The point is, when you open your home, this often and ideally would be a part of opening your heart to other people. These widows that go on the list, Paul says, are known for showing hospitality. I could make a whole lot of this and it wouldn't help, but there is this. In Paul's day, nearly no one had fewer resources to draw from than the widow. A slave might have less, and yet there were slaves who probably had more resources available to them than the widow, because they at least had a job, right? Okay. It's not like widows had they could throw these extravagant evenings. Oh, I mean, it could have been something as simple as I've made flatbread. Come enjoy it with me. Right? So the widows are known for showing hospitality. If a widow can show hospitality, I don't want to be a guilt monger here, but you know what? If a widow can show hospitality, I could show hospitality. I got more resources than the widows, certainly than the widows of this day. Okay. And then an interesting phrase that I think it requires a little bit of interpretation. Washing the feet of the Lord's people. There are some denominations today that still practice literal foot washing. They have foot washing services. What's the foot washing? Well, it goes back to the night on which Jesus was betrayed. He and the disciples were gathered together in the upper room in Jerusalem. This was probably, if you look at the timeline, this would have been on Thursday evening, which actually would have been about a day early on having the Passover meal together. It's called the Seder. Well, but in that meal, before that meal rather, Jesus pulls off his tunic, takes a towel and a basin of water, and he begins washing each one of the disciples' feet. That seems like what? That's way out of left field. These are things you already know, but I'm going to just review them. Number one, the Jerusalem is a pretty arid place. The humidity is low and the dust is high. And in Jesus' day, many, if not most, of the trails, paths, roads that they walked on would have been dirt roads, dirt paths. And they didn't wear shoes and socks. They wore sandals. Actually, this connects with hospitality, because the first act of hospitality that a good host would traditionally do for his guests is to provide water and a towel so that they could wash their feet, which would have been a refreshing moment. And if the host was of means and had a servant, the servant would do this, but not just any servant. It was a particular servant. It would have been the servant lowest on the totem. It was a job that was fairly undesirable, which is why the host didn't do it themselves. They had the servant do it. So there are several things in this picture. Jesus is acting as a host, but he hadn't delegated a servant to do this. He's doing it himself. This is a picture of what Jesus said of himself. He came not to be served, but to serve. Okay, it was a living model, a living illustration of humility and service for the disciples. He washed their feet, and he came to Peter, and Peter said, "Well, no, Lord, you're Lord. You'll never wash my feet." And what was Peter saying? Well, a lot of people think Peter was being real prideful, like, no, I don't. I don't think that was it at all. I think what Peter was saying is, Lord, please, I don't want you to lower your dignity because of me. And Jesus said, Peter, if I don't wash your feet, you can't have any part with me. Really, the meaning of that is, Peter, you got to let me do this. Peter said, well, okay then, Lord, then wash my hands, my head, and my feet, and the whole, give me a bath. He said, that's not the point, Peter. Well, that, by the way, Jesus, as he was doing this, one of the things he said to the disciples was, you don't understand this now, but later you will. Okay. I think the actual practice of literal washing of feet is, I don't want to be radical, but I'm thinking, wouldn't be a bad idea to bring that back into most of our church life, right? And my thinking is twofold. Number one, Jesus did it, and he said, I've set you an example. All right, maybe he meant you should wash one another's feet. But I think you have to be careful, because I think the example is less about, podiatry, hygiene, foot care, and more about humility and service to one another. Lowering ourselves to serve each other. Okay. Widows in Paul's day may have literally washed the feet of the followers there in their community of believers, in their church. At the very least, I think it's safe to say that they demonstrated this humble service that Jesus, I think, was the point of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. But they are known for this. They're known for their humility in service. Anybody, can anybody afford to not let that be part of what you want to be known for? Hey, I want to be known as a humble servant. I bet you do too. I'll pick this up again next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.